Angela Merkel's decision in the summer of 2015 to broadcast an open-door policy to millions of migrants from the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa has led to disaster on the continent of Europe. The sheer numbers alone are impossible to cope with. Add to this the inability to determine genuine refugees from economic migrants, potential contributors from guaranteed dependents, and harmless secularists from dangerous fanatics, and we are faced with a seemingly insurmountable challenge that is shattering national economies, endangering the lives of the public, and even leading to the breakup of the European Union itself. In other words,
this is a crisis, a large crisis. In fact, if you've got a moment, it's a 12-story crisis with a magnificent entrance hall, carpeting throughout, 24-hour porterage, and an enormous sign on the roof saying, "This is a large crisis. And a large crisis requires a large plan."
Unfortunately, we don't have a large plan. We have no plan. In fact, we have worse than no plan. We have Lily Allen. Now, for those of you unaware, Ms. Allen is a British pop singer and the latest in a zombie-like horde of celebrity virtue signalers on this issue. You know the type I mean, the champagne socialists who managed to leave their 8-bedroom apartments in Kensington for 5 minutes to lecture the rest of us on how we need to do more. Yeah, she's one of them. And they are just fantastic ambassadors for their cause, aren't they? You'll remember the Jude Law episode, of course, where the guy turned up to a migrant camp earlier in the year hoping they'd all be delighted to see him for some reason, and is instead met with gangs of rock-throwing men who attack his bodyguards and steal their possessions, causing him to totally lose it.
Kill them! Kill them all!
Okay, well that last bit didn't happen, but you get the point. And then we had Emma Watson, who, after being such a fierce advocate for the migrants settling in Europe, was challenged to spend a week with them in one of the camps. And she was apparently even considering this at one stage, presumably until someone finally reminded the poor girl that she's not actually a wizard, and won't in fact be able to deploy the Cruciatus curse to ward off hordes of third world Muslims who, as we all know, are just shining examples of chivalry when it comes to the fairer sex. So a precedent for utter embarrassment has been well and truly set here, and needless to say, Lily manages to live up to it. Here she is, on behalf of the BBC, talking to a young lad in the recently demolished migrant camp of Calais, the French city connected via the Channel Tunnel to Folkestone in South England.
Why did you leave Afghanistan?
So this is obviously the BBC's hand-picked refugee, the chap whose story is in the right place and will tug at the heartstrings effectively enough. This is the problem. What they're attempting here is to take a case that by all accounts seems relatively innocent. The lad was trying to avoid being conscripted by the Taliban, so he fled the country, and generalize that to the majority of cases, which is straight-up propaganda, as we'll learn later. Furthermore, it's perfectly possible to be fleeing the Taliban as a member of a rival Islamist sect. Even this boy's own father has been linked by some reports to the Mujahideen. And this is what people need to understand. These countries are unbelievably sectarian. I mean, it's like fucking Game of Thrones over there, alright? And just because you're not a part of House Lannister doesn't mean that you're not a part of House Frey, Bolton, Baelish or Clegane. The situation as presented by the majority of mainstream reporting is suicidally simplistic, and the idea that because somebody doesn't bunk up with the Taliban, everything's cool with the dude and no further information is required, that is woefully stupid and is exactly the kind of black and white thinking that has caused a lot of the problems we see in Europe at the moment.
The camp's closing in a couple of weeks. What are you going to do? So you've been trying to jump on lorries to get over into UK. That must be terrifying. Is that scary?
It's probably scary. It's also illegal. You can't do that. And here we get to the crux of the issue, okay? You don't get to break into countries, especially when the place you already reside is relatively safe. He's in France, okay? Last time I checked, France was still a bastion of civilization. Every person who has hitched a ride across the English Channel has flouted all manner of international law. You are required to claim asylum in the first safe country in which you arrive. You don't get to settle in Hungary just because you like the architecture, in Italy to try the ice cream, or in Sweden because the girls are hot, alright? These are not decisions you get to make. If you have family in a specific country, which this guy in fact does, you can make an application to that country and submit your case for processing. What you don't get to do is violate the sovereignty of the very place you expect to take care of you. Hardly the best start to a relationship, wouldn't you say? Yeah, you're breaking the law. Stop doing it.
And I know you're trying to get onto the lorries every night, but from what I'm hearing from the refugee volunteers here in the camp is that you have got a legal right to be in the UK.
He doesn't have a legal right to be in the UK, Lily. If his family are in the UK and have been granted residency, he has the right to apply to come to the UK. We still need to do all that pesky administrative stuff, like make sure he has a genuine reason to flee his country of origin and he won't blow us all up when he gets here. It's annoying, I know, but that goes for each and every individual, no matter how ostensibly genuine their circumstances appear to be.
So I wonder, have you started that process? Have you filled out the forms?
Not better for us, but screw us, right? I mean, it's only our country. Now I'm a little suspicious, because 4 months is nothing, okay? That's a football season, for crying out loud. Why not apply for asylum to Britain from France and show some respect for the people who, if your need is genuine, may ultimately decide to take you in? Now, this is pure speculation in his case, of course, but perhaps Rod Liddell offers a potential answer for us.
Yeah, it's actually not as difficult if we're talking about Calais as my fellow panellists have made out. It's not difficult at all, because 97.5% of the people in that refugee camp in Calais, in Sangatte, are not refugees. They are migrants. Now, it's not me saying that. It's not me saying that. You can listen to the non sequitur emotional incontinence of Simon, if you like, and go along with this sort of bizarre view of the world, but it is not the truth. Let's listen to what the main Muslim charity, which was raising money for those people in Calais, said. The guy who ran it went to Calais and said, "We are withdrawing our aid from Calais. They are almost exclusively," quotes, "fit young men who are happy and are not fleeing danger. I thought they had a valid reason to be there. They do not have a valid reason to be there." That's not me speaking, that's the charity that was raising money for them. But because of the Dianification of this crisis, as we've heard, the sort of stuff, the emotional stuff from Simon, and to a degree from Louise, this whipping up, they are human beings. Of course they're human beings, but what we must not do is do the wrong thing for the right reasons. And that would mean opening our doors and saying more should come, because more and more and more will die, will lose their lives.
And that's exactly right. What the open door loonies have succeeded in doing is actually endangering the lives of people by encouraging them to abuse the proper channels, and they should show some shame for that. I am not prepared to de-Annify this boy. I want his situation looked at carefully, and I want the good of the British people to be a priority when deciding whether or not to admit him. And we cannot set any kind of precedent whatsoever whereby lorry jumping is considered acceptable for all our sakes.
What are your hopes for the future? Just seems that 3 different intervals in this young boy's life, the English in particular, have put you in danger.
You fucking what, love?
Just seems that 3 different intervals in this young boy's life, the English in particular, have put you in danger. We've,
No, I don't know.
Bombed your country.
For a laugh. Just because, we've got to do something with our Tuesday nights. We deposed the Taliban, Lily, remember? The religious gangsters behind Al-Qaeda? September the 11th? No? Ring any bells? We weren't bombing his country. Afghanistan is not his country. It's barely a country. That's the point. It's nothing but a production factory for the world's terrorists. And you're not even listening to the kid. His own story rests on the fact that he hates the Taliban and was running from them. And at no point did he say, yeah, I had to leave. Britain was bombing my country. It's just utter nonsense.
Put you in the hands of the Taliban.
How have we done that? By fighting the Taliban? What? That's like saying we put Germans in the hands of Hitler by landing on Normandy.
And now putting you at risk, risking your life to get into our country.
Sorry, are we dragging him across the continent tied to the back of a horse? What the hell are you talking about? You notice how she just sucks all responsibility out of these people. He, along with plenty of others, is choosing to break international, French and British law by attempting to enter the UK illegally, and that's our fault, is it? Using that logic, you can blame the UK for just about anything. Yeah, I mean, the British had an empire once, which means we created the Taliban, and now we're making you murder your own mother. It's pathetic.
That seems... I apologise on behalf of my country. I'm sorry.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, I'm sorry too. I'm really sorry. I'm
so very, 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 very... Fuck you!
You apologise for yourself, okay? You know what was amazing about this? The young man's father, remember, formerly of a pro-Islamist faction, was reportedly baffled by this apology and couldn't understand it. We hate ourselves more than our enemies hate us. I mean, should we just pack up and end civilization now? We had a good run, I suppose. Oh, for fuck's sake. This is so embarrassing.
Sorry.
Reminds me of a catchy song, though.
I'm so sorry.
Buy him a house, then. I mean, you can do that. But of course, she can't really, because she's not just talking about him. She no doubt feels this way about every migrant in Calais and every migrant in general. She wants them all, presumably, to enter the United Kingdom, and is along with the BBC using this one story to emotionally manipulate the public in the most obvious way. Thankfully, most people see through it. Experience throughout the Brexit campaign has really sharpened the public up as to how the establishment operates, and blissfully, we don't as of yet allow our national policy to be dictated solely on the basis of the feelings of damaged and drug-addled pop stars. This is a monumental crisis for the continent, where the future of European civilization arguably hangs in the balance. On that basis, any approach we take to address it will require strength, not fragility. It will require dispassion, not hysteria, and it will require the use of our heads, not just our hearts.
Look, the strange thing about this story is that in Britain we quite understandably talk about this as an issue about Calais. 6,500 people in Calais. That's what is always the top of the news agenda on this here, and it's perfectly understandable. It's the nearest bit of this issue comes to us. But I think we have to remember, take a step right back to where these people come in. When people have been flooding into Europe, in particular in the last 18 months, they've been coming in mainly to Italy and Greece. And under the third iteration of the Dublin Treaty, those countries have a duty to fingerprint arrivals, to process them, to work out who they are, and for the arrivals to claim asylum in those countries. So these people who are in Calais should never have got to Calais. They should have had their asylum process gone through in either Greece or Italy, and then Greece or Italy should have decided whether they were legitimate asylum seekers and kept them, or decided they were not and returned them. And the reason I mention this is that the whole system across our continent has broken down from that moment onwards, of which Calais is just the last step of it. Because the people who come in there, even if they do, as most of them now don't, claim asylum in their first country of arrival, and the country does process it, which most of the time they don't, and it does decide that they shouldn't be there legally, and quite often that is the case, they still are not ever repatriated. So this whole system is broken. It's not just the British bit of it that's broken. It's certainly not going well. It's that the whole continent's system is broken, and there are lots of reasons for that. But we make a big mistake in this country when we think, why don't we deal with the 6,500 people here? Maybe we could take that in. We have no conception of the fact that camp will either move 10 metres or 100 metres down the road, and it'll fill up with exactly the same number of people again. So all of the actresses and actors and soap stars and politicians and others who use this to grandstand have to be asked the follow-on question. Let's say we took in all of the people in Calais. Do we take in the next 6,500 and the next and the next and the next? Because the supply is unending. And the people who are using this tragedy to burnish their personal liberal credentials and polish their halos have a lot more questions to answer than anyone else.